Welcome back, everyone. Today I have Wendy Castelino. Wendy is a therapist and trauma expert. Wendy, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Pippa, for inviting me on your podcast. It's a great honour to be a guest on your podcast. So thank you very much for inviting me. I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh, you're so kind. Thank you. First, very easy question is, where in the world are you?
Okay, so I am in England, Northamptonshire, if everybody wants any details. But yes, I live in England.
Perfect. And so the real reason you're here today is because you are a trauma specialist, and you've experienced a number of different ranges of modalities that you operate with. How did you get into the trauma side of therapy in the first place?
Well, I originally trained in drama many years ago, and it was an absolute disaster. I was far too anxious to go to auditions and everything like that. So I just sort of fell into drama therapy. That seemed to be, I did community drama and then I qualified as a drama therapist. So that was my first chance of a therapy, and that was like 30 years ago. And since then, I felt I really found my vocation. So I've trained in various modalities. I've trained in psychotherapy, psychodynamic psychotherapy. I'm a cognitive behavioural therapist, and I'm also an EMDR therapist as well, which I'll explain a little bit more later. And I suppose because I've had trauma in my life, I actually really feel very moved and drawn to working with people with trauma, because I think I can identify with them. And it makes a big difference when you actually see people come out their trauma and they're just so much better. It gives me immense job satisfaction.
I completely agree, and I can relate to that as well, as you know. But trauma isn't an easy area to work in. And before we get into sort of how you do what you do, one of the things I'm interested in is how do you look after your own well-being? Because when you're dealing with trauma, and it can come in all shapes and sizes, as you say, it can affect you as a therapist. So what steps do you take to keep yourself healthy?
I think that's a really good question. And actually, as part of my training, we're required to have supervision 1.5 hours a month. So there's always support there throughout your entire profession. That's what you need. So if you have actually anything that you feel you've been affected to, you can do that. Second thing, I think, is a role as a therapist to practice well-being. So some of the things that I actually encourage other people to do, I do myself. One of my favourite therapies is compassion-focused therapy, and mindfulness as well is actually very good. So compassion is all about, taking good care of yourself, making sure that you do all the practical things like eating well, good sleep, exercise, all the basic things, but making sure that, if you do feel bothered or burdened by something, that you do actually seek support and make sure that you're actually okay. And there's also a rule in therapy as well that really you shouldn't take on anything that for some reason you feel is too near the truth and will affect you, or if it's out your capability as well. So you always work within the boundaries of your capabilities, which I think is a very good rule as well. So you should be out of your depth or get overwhelmed.
I think this is a really important sort of point to make, because with the internet now, and it has its pros and its cons, I've experienced this where I've had someone from a hypnotherapy point of view who came to me after a bad hypnotherapy experience, hopefully not an experiment, and they'd had a panic attack during the hypnotherapy on a phobia.
Yeah.
And I, like you, I'm regulated. I have to check in and keep my CPD going. But not everyone does that. And particularly when dealing with trauma, I think it's really important for people to understand that that's what's going on behind the scenes, to make sure that you as a therapist are safe, but also they as the client are safe, and that therapeutic alliance between the two of you is preserved, because there is a governing body, a mentorship and a guideline there to protect everybody. And trauma can go to some really dark places. So having that set up is why I think you have to go to someone like you, who has all these trainings, all these specialities, rather than someone who, in some cases, perhaps has really good intentions, doesn't have the experience or the infrastructure to support the needs.
Absolutely. And I think I'm accredited cognitive behavioural therapist. So I actually have a membership body that I have ethical guidelines that I have to adhere to. And I'm accredited EMDR therapist, and the same thing. You actually have to go through not only training, but you have to meet certain criteria, and you have to pass certain, exams basically to actually maintain that accreditation. And like you say, you always have to continue professional development. And I take it very seriously as well. So you're right. When I see a person, the person's obviously extremely vulnerable from what they've been through. So there's certain steps to therapy as well. So one of the first steps is it would be like a referral, and making sure that the referral is appropriate as well, making sure that I can actually help that person. And then the next step is assessment. And part of that is actually looking at the sort of safety, if there's actually any issues as well. And then after that, with trauma, you'd also go through building resources. So like making sure they know how to relax properly, or to sort of have a practice a safe place is another one. So that before they even go into the trauma, they have got enough resources to make sure that they feel well and stable enough before we actually go to there. So all these kind of protocols and everything are really important, I think, so that the person does feel supported and safe, and they have to trust me as well, that I'm looking after their well-being, and I'm there to help them, and that if they do feel bad, they know what to do.
Absolutely wonderful. So you have a range of modalities, and first of all, why did you decide to have so many different modalities that you can work with? And for those who are listening, modalities are basically just different types of therapy, therapeutic approaches and therapy types. So you have at least 4. I think you've probably got more than that, haven't you?
Well, I think because this is my passion, and because I'm giving away my age here, 35 years is quite a long time. So you start off with drama
So you're
therapy.
35 now. That's fine. Yeah.
Oh, I love it, Pippa. I love it. Yeah. Yeah, I'm 35. Yeah. But drama therapy was great, but I wanted to have a bit more in depth. So that's why I did the sort of psychotherapy kind of course, which gave me some more skills, I think. And then the reason really I ended up, this sounds awful when I say it, but the reason I ended up doing cognitive behavioural therapy is it was very popular at the time, and it was actually growing it was at the time, it was just sort of starting off. So it became very, very popular. So I suddenly thought, and I thought, to be honest, well, just do it, because it's popular. But actually, to be fair, I've really learned a lot from it. It's very, very good. But when my reasons for starting it weren't very pure. It was more to sort of make sure I get work.
I mean,
now I
we've got
don't
to
know
pay
what
bills.
I'd do without cognitive behaviour therapy. But also
Yeah.
things have evolved over the years. So now cognitive behaviour therapy has evolved into other therapies. There's something they call third wave, which doesn't make any sense to anybody. But this is where cognitive behaviour therapy now incorporates mindfulness. A lot of people who do cognitive behaviour therapy have trained in compassion-focused therapy as well. There's dialectic behaviour therapy. It's all these different sort of work as ACT. So they've evolved into, as we do as practitioners, and have found new ways of helping and relating to people. So I think it's more a process of evolution, really, which is good, and that's how it should be.
Definitely. I know I'm currently doing a course on mindfulness-based cognitive behavioural therapy.
Yeah.
So
good.
Having previously done mindfulness-based stress reduction, so I'm doing all the mindfulness stuff at the moment, which is fascinating.
Excellent.
But I come of it, I'm very much in the neuroscience side of things, and how the brain is changing. But I think that goes to your point of the evolution, because as we understand the mind more,
yes,
the therapies have to go with the new learning and have to evolve to match the way we understand the brain to work. And it's such an exciting time from a purely, I guess, learning point of view, but learning to help others point of view of the breakthroughs we're having and how these modalities can help with trauma.
Absolutely. And a lot of the therapies now do include sort of a neuroscience element, or again, I think what cognitive behavioral therapy did about 20 years ago brought an element of, research evidence into a therapy, which is much needed, really. Where's the proof that it works? And I think it's evolved there. And absolutely understanding how the brain and the body work, I think is so useful to individuals to understand that. And once they feel they understand what's going on in their brain and body, it really helps them to actually feel a bit more in control. And they don't feel, a lot of people come to me, they feel that there's hopelessness, they're never going to get better. A lot of them think they're, always going to be mentally ill. And once they actually see the change in them, it's life-changing. And that is just so amazing. And that's one intervention, is actually helping them to understand how their brain and body work together. And therefore, yes, you can do something about this. You can actually change.
Yeah, 100%. So when we talk about trauma, it has quite a breadth. So when you talk about trauma, what are you talking about specifically?
So from mental health services, sometimes it can be helpful to understand a way of explaining trauma. So trauma really, in its simplest form, is simply an event which was distressing or overwhelming to the individual. And you just need to know that, and you can use therapy around just knowing a person's experience. Another kind of category under the mental health services, acute distress disorder. And this is more of a sort of short-term temporary thing where they've had an experience. It lasts about 2 to 4 weeks. And that's when a person feels very panicky and very anxious and overwhelmed. So that would be like a sort of mini trauma, really. And then it goes to another level, which is called PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. And this is where it's a more serious trauma, and there's certain criteria that people actually meet. So somebody who's perhaps been in a life-threatening situation, a bit more serious, and they have slightly more severe symptoms. So classic symptoms, if you've got PTSD, is hypervigilance, where you always sort of feel on edge. You know, you're sort of like looking at things all the time, and you hear a bang and you get the startle response, would be one thing. You have a lot of intrusions, so you often have sort of flashbacks or nightmares, so you can't sleep, which is terribly debilitating when your nightmares are waking you up and you don't have that good quality sleep. And also avoidance is another area. So often people with PTSD, you know, it's very, very distressing. So they don't want to go and visit the trauma, or they don't want to go and visit the site where the trauma happened. They would avoid it as well. And sometimes they would not want to talk about it in therapy. So that can be very difficult. And then the last category is called complex PTSD. And this is where a person has had many or multiple traumas, often in their childhood. And, you know, abuse is obviously one of them. And therefore, that can really deeply affect how they see themselves. It can affect their self-perception, their trust of others, disassociation, where they actually sort of feel sort of numb or out of their bodies, is another symptom as well. So that can go even more deeper. And that's obviously takes longer and harder to help a person, but it's still possible to help a person with complex PTSD. Yeah. So those are the sort of main broad categories. But the most important thing is that if you feel as though you've got trauma and it's an emotionally upsetting experience, then you can definitely use therapies to help you to overcome that particular experience.
Absolutely. Now, I've often heard, and I'm sure you've had the same thing, this comparison of what happened to me wasn't as bad as insert example. And how would you respond to those kind of people who go, you know, who basically they're saying that my trauma isn't traumatic enough, therefore how can I not be okay?
Well, obviously, it's not healthy to compare. That's one of the things that we do, which doesn't help our mental health, to negatively compare ourselves to others. So I would encourage them not to do that, to see themselves as an individual. And actually, to us, our mind and body doesn't really react to other people. Our body is telling us we got trauma. So if you don't actually get the trauma out of your body, it doesn't go away on its own. Basically, it will stay there. So it doesn't matter how small it is or whether it's worse or better. It's really healthy for that person to overcome that trauma, and then they feel so much better afterwards. And then, you know, sometimes what happens also with trauma is you can have anxiety on top of that, and depression. So people come with depression, and actually if you sort of work back, you actually often find a traumatic experience. So if you work with the underlying traumatic experience, often that will really help the depression. So the person just, you know, it doesn't matter if it's a small event, if that person can overcome that and be their true selves and actually be their best selves, then that's a marvelous outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it is. So with the different modalities you use, then let's look at those. So start at the very top, the cognitive behavioral therapy. What is that and how does it work?
Okay. So it's a little bit of a thing in the title, but it's missing something. So cognitive is obviously the way we think about things. Behavior is how we respond to how we're thinking, and the therapy is the therapy. But obviously you've got emotions involved there as well, and they are incredibly important in therapy. And I think CBT has kind of missed a trick there, really. So sometimes it's actually understanding the links between and also your physical symptoms as well. So if you actually understand what's going on, so what would happen, a very simple example is you'd have a trigger. So classic car accident. So you have a terrible car accident and it, you know, and the trauma is still within you. What would happen is often when people go and drive again, they're reminded of the trauma. So what happens is the trigger is driving, The thoughts are, I'm not safe, it's dangerous, I'm bound to have another car accident again. The physical reaction is probably anxiety and panic. So their body is sort of, the heart's racing, they're shaking and everything like that. And the behavior is either very safety, like driving very, very slowly, or avoiding certain roads and everything like that. So when you actually sort of break it down, and then it's a case of building up and changing those skills, really. Sometimes CBT, I think, is a skills-based therapy. So it's about actually learning how to calm themselves again, challenge some of those beliefs that, I'm going to have a car accident every single time I go out and everything like that, and encourage them to practice the driving so they get confident again. So that's a sort of quite a simple overview of cognitive behaviour therapy. It is more complicated than that, but I think that's a good example to show that.
Definitely.
Shall I move? Are you okay if I move on to another therapy?
Absolutely, go for it.
So another one which I think is really good, which people don't know very much about, it's called NET, which stands for narrative exposure therapy. And I've been training this, and it's actually a trauma therapy. And it's really a lovely, lovely therapy. And one of the reasons it's a lovely therapy is basically it encourages the person to sort of tell their story from beginning to end. It's very, very good for refugees. So often people, and actually perhaps children in care as well, people have had sort of like a potted kind of life, and it's sort of been fragmented. So actually, if you sort of start at the beginning and go through your life, you don't do it all in one session. Obviously, you sort of break it down and everything like that. It helps the person sort of get meaning and sense to their life as well. And then the traumas are called hotspots. And sometimes you have to go through a terrible event in your country and you've come over here. You'd have to go through the terrible event in your country several times until you sort of processed it. You tell the story again and again until it doesn't bother you anymore, that type of thing. And you sort of say it with compassion and understanding. You get a different meaning of it, but you sort of tell your story. And so the person just sort of feels very different towards the end. They feel as though their story's been heard. They understand the story. They understand a bit more about them. And they've got that sort of almost like that biological understanding of their life as they go through. So that's called narrative exposure therapy.
That's a really fascinating one, I think, because it does combine the mind's need for metaphors and stories. And we love to learn through stories. And I always think that sometimes the narrative we tell ourselves can affect how we view ourselves and how we view the world. And so be able to shift from, basically you're shifting from victim state, from being not in control to being in control. But I find that NET is it's quite, I'm not saying it's gentle as in it's not hard, but it's a gentle way of processing things, and the exposure part, as you say, is key to doing that. But I find it to be just a little bit more wholesome for some people, because it isn't so much, you're reframing your story. I feel like I'm not explaining it very well.
No, you're saying it very well, Pip. I totally agree with you. You are reframing your story. Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's something about therapy. It's about you're witnessing the story as well. You're listening to the person who's telling the story. You're enabling them. And you're trying to get the person to get the different perspective, but you're helping the person to get the different perspective. And actually how much they've been incredibly brave, or they're survivor of what they've been through as well. Like you say, that reframing of the story is really, really important. Yeah. And you're right. It is. I mean, it's hard going through the trauma bits, but it does feel like a gentler talking through things and just letting the person express whatever they need to express at that time.
Yeah, no, it's a wonderful one.
Yeah.
So what's your next modality?
So the next one I'm going to choose is compassion focused therapy. And this was in England. There is an American version, but Paul Gilbert is the person who developed it in England. And one of the things I like about compassion focused therapy is several things. One is it does talk about the science of the mind and how the brain works. It talks about the emotional regulation system. So that's one of the sort of things I use to actually explain how the brain and the body work and how it responds. And then it sort of also describes that we're fully human, really. Sometimes the way we respond is natural to the situation. If you are feeling, we often feel quite threatened. What I say now is we have a threat system. And obviously we're not going to be eaten by a, dinosaur or terrible bad animal. It doesn't happen in Northamptonshire very often anyway, but it's more the threat to how we see ourselves, our ego. So if, say, you're going to do a performance on stage, say, you're worried about mucking up or get your lines wrong. So you actually go into very high levels of anxiety. And so the idea is you understand that you're feeling threatened and you calm yourself down. You're so much better emotionally regulated, I would say. You feel sort of calmer. And the other thing it teaches you is to be kind to yourself as well. So the idea of actually having compassion to yourself, compassion to others. And you can also develop compassionate people. You can actually create figures or imaginary people or real people who you can go to actually sort of enable you to see a different perspective as well. And that works really, really well for lots and lots of people. And you've got a lot of choice about it as well. I was talking to somebody who has got this sort of mythical being, but the person hasn't got a face, but it didn't really matter as long as the person was giving him some sort of compassionate ideas. So when you actually come to talking about trauma, if you again use a compassionate response, it's much more about, this is a natural response. It wasn't your fault. It was often unintended consequences. You're in the wrong place at the wrong time. So again, that's a bit of retelling the story, but in a very kind, gentle way. So I think it's really, really good. I use that all the time.
Yeah, I think, and again, it's one I feel you don't have to have trauma to, well, you don't have to have trauma to use any of these.
No.
But I think compassion is something, even if you're just having a bad day, to learn those methodologies to remind yourself of being the compassionate to yourself, I think is something we can all do with, regardless of our mental health situation. It's a wonderful therapy.
Absolutely. And you actually notice a lot of people who aren't even trained in compassion focused therapy, they often use the word compassion now. It's sort of become like a norm, I think, in therapy. And with the world, the world's never, there's always bad things happening in the world. There's always terrible things happening in the world and sad and everything like that. We can get very overwhelmed and depressed and things like that, can't we? We feel overwhelmed sometimes with what's going on in the world. And that idea of just sort of going back and going to a compassionate place in yourself, it sort of can be very self-soothing and very kind of self-regulating as well, which we all need. You're right, we all need that, don't we? It's just so important that we do that. And another point I just want to make about compassion, another thing I have about compassion, it is not weak, or sometimes the word compassion, I think, has problems with it. It's not weak or soppy. It's actually strong and being strong and standing up for your rights and your morals as well. It's standing for what you believe in as well. So it's a strength, not a wishy-washy woo-woo thing.
Well, there's science behind some woo-woo, but this particular one, I think there's a kind of an anti-culture, isn't there, of not being kind to yourself, and it's finding the balance between what I call Instagram perception of I'm having a wellness break and I'm gonna have my favorite coffee and these things are important. I'm not trying to mock them, but behind that, you often have people who are suffering, and they're creating that lifestyle because that's what everyone thinks they should have and all the rest of it. But I always say, are they actually showing themselves compassion? Because if they were, would they do all these things for their audience, or would they do them for themselves? And there's a lot of things that we do because we think we want to do it for other people, or we think other people want us to do these. And if we learn to have compassion for ourselves, it's exactly what you say. It's standing up for, okay, this is what I need to do for me. And other people may benefit, they may not benefit. But that's okay because this is what I need to do for me, and that's also okay.
Absolutely. And I think I often see people who are very good with other people and give everybody else kindness and love and support and everything like that, and are absolutely horrible to themselves. They really put themselves down and very negative. And of course, that's not the idea. It is a therapy to help. Of course, it's about giving compassion to others and understanding their point of view as well. But, it is about proper compassion, like, psychological compassion, as well as more than just having a cup of coffee, isn't it? It's actually really, again, understanding your brain and looking at all your negative thoughts as well, and the way you talk to yourself, and actually trying to understand yourself and just be a little bit kinder to yourself as well, and not set yourself up to fail or have unrealistic expectations.
No, completely agree. And the last one, EDMR. Did I get it right way around? EDM. I always get the wrong around.
Again, another weird therapy name, isn't it? It's called EMDR, which is
EMDR. I always do that.
Eye movement desensitization reprocessing, which I can often stumble over as well.
It's a mouthful.
It was Dr. Shapiro developed it, I think, in about the 1980s. And there's a story. The story goes is that she was walking around. She was a psychologist. She was sort of walking around and she was looking around while she was walking around. And actually what she noticed when she was looking around, she started to feel a bit better. And being a psychologist, she sort of looked into it and she realised actually the eye movement, for some reason, is really good at processing trauma memories. So she developed this whole therapy around it. And it is quite a unusual therapy because it involves actually moving your eyes in a certain way, or you can do tapping, you can use audio as well. But something about the process of doing that, and obviously I'm trained to do it, you can't just do it at home, you have to go through certain things. It just seems to shift the actual memory or the trauma. So sometimes if you feel the memory of the trauma and it's sort of causing all this panic and all this anxiety, if that goes, it can go and then it's gone. You might remember it, but you don't feel that terrible, overwhelming hypervigilance and panicky and anxiety that you feel from the trauma.
Mm.
So it is really, and I love talking about it because I don't think many people know about it still. It's still quite a new therapy, but it does really get to the trauma in amazing ways. And so, but again, it's to actually face it. It's quite a emotional experience as well. So again, I think it's really important that people are properly trained in it and they know what they're doing because it can be, facing your trauma can be quite a big thing to do.
Absolutely. I've got a friend who experienced a lot of trauma in his childhood, became a drug and alcohol addict, came clean. This is like sort of 20, 30 years ago he became clean, but he's been kept working through trauma basically ever since. And he said to me, this is really recently, that the one thing that made the difference was EMDR. Yeah, so and he says everyone should do this, and I completely agree. Everyone I know who's gone through it, who's had trauma, have had amazing experiences compared to not using it essential. So it's such a powerful tool. But again, like all these things, having the right training. And I know the criteria to get the right training is quite stringent for proper reasons. You have to have certain qualifications already to get there, and they don't just take anybody, but it is really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely as well. And I think you also need the time to make sure, again, you have that emotional regulation first. That when I mean emotional regulation, I mean is sort of having enough practices so that if you feel the feelings of the trauma coming up, you feel, okay, I can handle that. And I don't overreact to it. I won't have a panic attack, or I feel in control. I can actually stop, regulate myself and feel in control. I think that's a really important process that you have to go. EMDR teaches you that, but a lot of therapists, like compassion focused therapy, is very good for doing that emotional regulation as well. So yeah, I totally agree with that. I thought, again, another therapy, for years I thought that's nonsense, that's a bit of woo woo. What's that all about? Gradually you hear more and more about it, more people doing it and sort of saying what the results were. So I trained it and I thought, right, it does work.
Yeah.
Wow, this is really powerful.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think also the other point, the power of you in particular is this range of therapies that you can access, because you've already mentioned it, but very rarely can you just go in and have one session and go, hey, you're fixed now. Like there are levels to go through. And the reason I train in different therapies is the same as you, is like, I need this tool for that thing and this tool for that thing. And combining them together makes me a better therapist. And particularly with trauma, I think having that toolkit to navigate the different challenges is so important. Have you got plans to do any more training?
Just another important thing is they have to know that you're okay with their trauma as well. Sometimes they're worried about talking about it or it affecting you as well. Can you handle their stuff? And there's obviously a lot of shame and embarrassment around some of the things that they've done. So I think it's really important that people know that I choose this and I want to do it, and I want them to get better, and I want them to talk about it or say what they need to say. In EMDR, you don't always have to talk about the trauma, which is something different, which is interesting. But sometimes it can actually really help to fully process it. Sometimes it's good to talk about it, so it's better processed. But yeah, I think it's really important that they have confidence that you can handle what they're going to tell you as well. So Yes, and I think also the most important thing as well from a therapy is to go into the depth. It's a great privilege, but a great responsibility actually helping people to do this.
I'm just starting to outsource, but I do a bit of outsourcing, a bit of myself, so we can edit that out either way. Okay, yep, do
Okay.
that.
Yeah, so I think what's really important when you're dealing with any person, it's a big responsibility to take care of that person and to do a good job. So I think it's really important as a therapist to do the trainings thoroughly so that you really understand them as well. And again, the ongoing training that you need to do as well to keep on practicing. So, just sort of reading a book doesn't really do it. So I do read books as well, but, you really have to go into the depth of understanding something before you can use it with somebody else as well.
Mm.
And that hopefully gives the person confidence to think, oh, yeah, this person has learnt it, does know what they're doing, and hopefully helps that person to feel safe.
Definitely, so important. And again, it's one of the things that worries me with the world that we have. With anybody can be a guru, but you can do more harm than good
Yeah.
if you don't understand the tools that you've got. So
So- Go on.
what are your plans now? What's next for you?
Good question. I think one thing that I'm doing is I'm wanting to promote more mental health education, and this is the reason why we're doing the podcast, is so that more people can learn more about therapy, what's out there, what the choices are, because sometimes people don't really know, that they just go to a counsellor, say, and they don't really know what they're getting or what the differences are as well. So actually educating more people to say what's around. And a lot of people can't access therapy. It's either too expensive or there's long waiting lists. So if people can learn some skills and understanding, and then I think that could really help more people. And again, if anything, mental health is still growing, isn't it? Around the world, there's still problems. It's not getting any less. And so more and more people actually need to actually understand how their brain works. Because you're not taught it at school, are you? That's the problem. You're not taught these skills at school. So you can suffer quite a lot if you don't really understand these skills. And that's terrible, isn't it? It's much better if we can help more people. So
Definitely.
my passion is to continue to educate people so they understand better and make better choices as well.
I love that. And do you know what? I was, when I started on my journey, I was like you. I was like, what's all this woo stuff? And even mindfulness, I was like, that's just woo stuff. And then I did the clinical hypnotherapy, and then I looked at mindfulness-based stress reduction and the brain scans of people going through mindfulness. And I think what I realized, and it goes back to your point about training, the mindfulness you see on the internet, yes, go and sniff a flower. Yes, go outside. Yes, go and have a cup of tea and drink it slowly. But there's so much more to it than that. And when you do it right, you can literally see in the brain the changes, and it's amazing. And that's stuff that people just need to know is, I mean, there's nothing wrong with going outside and sniffing your food and all the rest of that. That's still good because it slows you down and makes you think about stuff. But if you really embrace these practices, whatever they are, and if you really get to understand the science behind it, or find someone who can help you on that journey, like a therapist, then these things are transformational. And it means that we don't have to sit in our misery or in our mental health challenges as well.
Yeah, very much. But sometimes when you do mindfulness, people can also bring up more anxiety because they're suddenly becoming aware of stuff. They're actually thinking and become more. So also that importance of training and guidance as well. It is another reason why, it's really important that, like you said, you get the correct training. I always say, if you broke your leg, would you just kind of strap it up and just drag it around, or would you actually go to a doctor and get it set properly? Most people hopefully will go to a doctor and get it set. But when it's the mind, people think, oh yeah, I just go and, like you say, sniff a flower. I like that. Just go and sniff a flower and I'll be fine. Nothing wrong with sniffing flowers. Some people have that attitude that because it's my mind. But if your mind's the most important thing, isn't it? That's the thing that you really need to take good care of. So again, it's really important that you go to somebody who has earned the right to treat you, really, has got the credentials to treat you.
Definitely. Now, you also have a podcast.
Yes.
Would you like to tell us about that? What's the name?
Yeah, my podcast is called Don't Get a Therapist Yet. And the reason I chose that title is what I was saying earlier about people actually getting better educated about therapy. It's not always about therapy. It's about mental health education. There's plenty of people who are good at mental health education who aren't therapists. They've got different skills. But by going there is that they get a little bit more understanding and awareness of mental health issues. And they can put those things into practice. It's got a practical element. Every person I've had has got some sort of speciality. I had a neuropsychologist on who was explaining a lot more about the brain. She's sort of specialist in that area. So that's really good. But everybody I've had has been an amazing guest. And so they all bring a little bit of expertise in their particular area. You know, you can actually listen to any of the in the interviews and learn something about mental health in the process. So thank you for allowing me to mention that.
We'll put links in the show notes so everyone can find it as well. I think it's a wonderful
Thank you.
podcast. And so the last question really is, we've covered a lot of things on trauma, but is there anything I haven't asked you that you think people need to hear about trauma, or about how we can work with trauma?
I think really the most important thing, isn't it, is never, like you said at the beginning, your trauma is never too small to deal with. And it can be an upsetting event, an emotional event. You know, even going back years, the number of people I see who've been bullied at school, it's happened years ago, but they're still carrying that around with them, you know, and to have the freedom to say, if it's still distressing you, you don't have to have that. You can actually be free of that. And that's just a wonderful, wonderful message. And it might seem very frightening and daunting to go to a thing called a therapist. You know, what's one of those? That means I'm mad. Not at all. I think it actually creates a lot of strength and a lot of bravery to go to a therapist. So I've always an admiration that people actually sort of turn up and want to do these things, because it's very, very brave. So I'm always very respectful of people who actually sort of want to come and deal with these issues. But however small it is, you know, if you can actually get it sorted so you can live your life more freely, lighter. People often say they feel lighter, especially after EMDR. They feel lighter, which is great, isn't it? And sleep more as well. You know, if you've got nightmares, you can't sleep. That's a torture, isn't it? You know, if you can actually get those nightmares sorted so they don't happen anymore, what a difference that can make to your life.
No, I love that. And I always think that if you can just fix sleep, you will fix so many problems. And so, yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much. Wendy, if people want to find you, how can they find you?
So my website is called wendycastelino.com, and how to spell that will be in the show notes as well. But it is my name, and that has all my contact details, and it has loads of resources on there as well. So that's the best way of contacting me. You can just Google my name and it should come up, actually, wendycastelino.com.
Perfect. Thank you. Wendy, it's been lovely having you. Thank you so much for your time. And I look forward to also keep listening to your podcast as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much for allowing me to be a guest on your show. Thank you very much.
Thank you.